Hello ladies and gentlemen, we're finally talking about a good game on the channel. Haven't had the chance to do this for months. What a better way to celebrate than by revisiting the Metal Gear franchise. With the game that most fans probably started off with, Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation 1 released in 1998. In addition to that, we'll also be heavily comparing it to 2003's Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes for the GameCube, which was the remake developed to fuse the story and world of MGS1 with the mechanics and gameplay of 2001's Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. I promised this review a while ago, since I ran a poll on Twitter while the Metal Gear 2 review was in development back in November for you to choose between Metal Gear Solid or Mega Man X4 and Extreme 1 to be the follow-up videos. Well, as you can probably tell, X4-1 and MGS1 was supposed to be released after Extreme 1 and before Thievius Raccoonus, but had to be put on the back burner until today. So in case you haven't seen them, back in August and November of 2016 I did a review of Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear 2 respectively, as well as briefly mentioning their NES counterparts, Metal Gear and Snake's Revenge. So I highly recommend checking those out, despite the fact that I've come incredibly far as a content creator since then. Although if you haven't seen them in a while, to sum it up, I think both games are really good and well worth your time, but not something you need to drop everything to play. Since while I do think on the whole they are good games, they have issues like backtracking, the card system, and some of the more annoying bits of Metal Gear 2 like the swamp section, the Green Beret section. Anyway, to make up for the amount of time away from Metal Gear, I'll be reviewing Metal Gear Solid 1, but the next review will be Sons of Liberty, so stay tuned for that, guys. After the MSX games and their NES counterparts were released, the Metal Gear series pretty much sat on the sidelines for 8 years, missing the entirety of the 16-bit era. However, with the dawn of 3D gaming, Metal Gear 3 began development. Soon after, the name had to be changed since it had been years since Metal Gear 2, like I just said, and also, that game was only released to the Asian market since Americans and Europeans got that piece of crap Snake's Revenge on the NES. So in other words, the final name of Metal Gear 3 was Metal Gear Solid, since it was going from 2 dimensions to solid 3D. Right away, the game establishes some intrigue since there isn't a flashy cover art or anything, just the logo with a white background, so already looking at it from the shelves has your attention. The back of the box gives you some basic information about your mission, telling you that this is a game where you play as a government agent on his mission to stop terrorists from launching a nuclear weapon. So while you might not be sure what you're getting yourself into, the premise itself is interesting. The game is so loaded that it's on 2 discs, most of which probably being cutscenes, so we'll get to that later. The game also comes with an incredibly detailed manual explaining characters, backgrounds, and even a full-on glossary giving definitions to many of the terms used in the game, like what Outer Heaven is or what a Metal Gear is. So if you're worried about canon if you're jumping in here, the menu and manual have got you covered with detailed information on the Outer Heaven uprising and the Zanzibar land disturbance to get yourself up to speed. So with all that out of the way, this is going to be an in-depth review exploring the entirety of the story, so I shall issue a warning. This video will definitely spoil the events of Metal Gear, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, and Metal Gear Solid. And just to be safe, I'll also issue a warning for the entirety of the series. So you have been warned. With that said, this is Metal Gear Solid versus the Twin Snakes. 6 years after the fall of Zanzibar land in the year 2005, the United States is facing yet another crisis, so they've pulled Solid Snake out of retirement in Alaska yet again to perform one more sneaking mission. This time around, 6 members of Foxhound have gone rogue and have set up shop on the nuclear weapons disposal facility, Shadow Moses Island. Those 6 being Decoy Octopus, the Master of Disguise, the Giant Shaman, Vulcan Raven, the Deadly Sharpshooter, Sniper Wolf, the Telepathic Psycho Mantis, the Interrogation Specialist and Gunfighter, Revolver Ocelot, and finally their leader, Liquid Snake. Those last 2 being some of the most important characters in the series going forward. Solid Snake is once again led by Colonel Roy Campbell in addition to Master McDonald Miller, both of them still helping Snake get through the area, as well as new faces, Dr. Naomi Hunter, who is a part of Foxhound's medical staff, as well as Mei Ling, who's the designer of Snake's new tech such as the Codec, which is a more evolved form from the transceiver from the last 2 games. As well as his Soliton radar, which again is a more evolved and more efficient version of his radar from Metal Gear 2. And finally, Nastasha Romanenko, who is an expert on nuclear weapons. The terrorists are demanding that the government turns over the remains of Big Boss, who was burned to death by Snake last time, as well as $1 billion, or else they'll launch a new type of nuclear warhead upon an undisclosed location. Snake's mission is to find out whether or not they can do this, and to rescue their hostages, the DARPA chief Donald Anderson, and the president of Arms Tech, Kenneth Baker. For someone as experienced as Snake, this doesn't take too long. However, upon finding the DARPA chief, Snake learns that the terrorists are in possession of yet another Metal Gear, this time known as Metal Gear Rex. After finding this out, the DARPA chief mysteriously dies of a heart attack. Just to stop the summary for a second, up to this point the story really hasn't gone anywhere, and as a result nothing of interest has really happened yet, but right around now this is when that changes. Snake busts out of the cell to meet a mysterious woman who's inexperienced at combat but survives the oncoming wave of guards. The The moment the story gets good though is right here when this happens. This is when the notion that you were playing a serious, grounded military game goes completely out the window. From this point on, Snake must deal with these extremely insane situations that are nothing like what you were expecting. In the previous two games, the villains, while having the crazy names for sure, none of them were particularly powerful beyond a human level. However, here, these guys dive into the supernatural territory with villains like Vulcan Raven or Psycho Mantis. Although a bit of a nitpick would be how the DARPA chief tells Snake about Psycho Mantis and he acts confused.
Psycho Mantis can read people's minds. You can't resist.
Psycho Mantis?
Despite the fact that in the intro, Campbell tells Snake about all the members of Foxhound.
Psycho Mantis, with his powerful psychic abilities.
So anyway, Snake finds Baker but a stop-right revolver Ocelot, who in this game doesn't really do anything all that outside the ordinary. He appears a lot, but we don't see the side of his character that we get to see in later games. As in those games, he's arguably the most important Metal Gear character of all time. This isn't actually a flaw though, for a reason we'll talk about later, but it's just an observation. What we do know about him though is he just can't get enough of spinning that revolver.
Special Operations Foxhound. Revolver. Ocelot.
Their fight is interrupted by the appearance of a cyborg ninja who cuts off Ocelot's hand and gets away. But Snake then takes care of Baker, who tells us about Ocelot's love of torture, which is subtle foreshadowing for later. However, though, in Metal Gear 2 we were told how the whole world had to abandon their nukes. However, Baker reveals that that couldn't be further from the truth, and that all countries all over the world still have theirs. Right after that reveal, Baker seemingly dies of another heart attack, which at this point has Snake incredibly skeptical of his allies, since this is a little too coincidental for him. And Campbell is not a very good liar.
Colonel, are you listening? Now he's dead too.
I have no idea.
Snake then has to team up with the Colonel's niece, Meryl, who was the woman from earlier who joined Foxhound, but didn't really agree with the idea of the revolution and so was tossed in prison. The only way to get in contact with Meryl is that you have to check the back of the box to find her codec frequency. And I'm pretty sure they did this as an anti-piracy method, since you can't progress from this point on if you don't have a box or internet to look it up with. Still though, at the end of the day, this is a pretty strong fourth wall break, as well as other instances where the characters refer to video game-like concepts such as saving or pressing certain buttons, although they never stop taking themselves seriously in these moments to preserve the tone of the game. Combined with the insane things that happen, but the serious story at the same time, this makes Metal Gear Solid's plot an incredibly memorable one that has an identity all its own. With that said, Snake progresses further and defeats a tank with nothing but hand grenades and eventually finds one of the scientists behind Rex, that being Dr. Hal Emmerich. But he's being attacked by the cyborg ninja from earlier, and so through an extremely atrocious boss battle, Snake defeats him and finds out that he's the one and only Gray Fox. Wait a minute. Wasn't Kyle Schneider brought back from the dead to be a cyborg ninja in Metal Gear 2? Well, yes. More info on that later. According to Naomi, apparently after his death, Gray Fox had been taken from the minefield and was experimented on by Dr. Clark, who was written to be a male character in this game, but Metal Gear Solid 3 and 4 retcon that and make Dr. Clark a female character. Anyway, these experiments turned him into the cyborg ninja we see before us now. Before Snake can even worry about that, he talks to Emmerich, who upon learning that Rex is going to be used for destructive purposes, decides to help Snake destroy it, and chooses to go by the name Otacon, short for Otaku Convention, since he's really into anime, let's just say. Although he's one of the more memorable characters in this game, since he goes through a lot of development in this game alone. Since he starts out timid and afraid, but at the end is the one who helps Snake not only destroy Rex, but also helps him escape from Shadow Moses. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Snake meets up with Meryl and the two come in contact with Psycho Mantis, and after one interesting sequence, Snake defeats him. Then they make it to the tower to Building 2, but Meryl is shot by Sniper Wolf and Snake needs to leave to find a sniper rifle, but upon returning, Meryl is gone. Snake is then captured and comes face to face with Liquid Snake, who reveals that he and Solid Snake are both the last surviving sons of Big Boss. Which, by the way, it was never established at all that Snake and Big Boss had any kind of relationship before this game, other than maybe Snake being instructed by Big Boss in his early days at Foxhound. I mean, it isn't a contradiction since nothing said that they weren't related, but this obviously wasn't thought of until now. This begins the torture scene, which is extremely effective, more info to come. But while in his prison cell, Snake sees the rotting corpse of the DARPA chief next to him, which doesn't make any sense since he just died. But before he can think about it, Snake begins to question Campbell and Naomi more, since too many strange things are going on for it to be a coincidence. And again, Campbell isn't that great at lying.
But I want the lies to end now.
What are you talking about?
However, Snake puts all that aside when he begins talking to Naomi. And this is one of the best scenes in the entire series.
I don't have any family. No. Wait. There was a man who said he was my father.
Where is he?
Dead. By my own hand.
Whether it be the music in the background or just how well the actors deliver these lines, since you really hear just how unapologetic Snake is for killing Big Boss. He is sad about the whole thing.
That's the trauma that Mantis was talking about. The one we share in common.
But clearly, like I just said, he doesn't regret it.
And you were able to kill him? Knowing that?
Yep.
However, we have one glaring problem with the writing to address. Pay close attention.
By my own hand.
Big Boss.
What? Big Boss? I had no idea.
There was no way you could. It happened in Zanzibar 6 years ago.
You see, this is fine if you haven't played the MSX games, but if you have played Metal Gear 2 in particular, then you know that unfortunately this is a blatant retcon. As has been said in other videos on this game, for many fans, retcons started becoming noticeable in Metal Gear Solid 4 since many elements of the first 5 games were retconned just to explain things that didn't make any sense, like where Vamp got his powers from. However, we have retcons dating all the way back to this game. During the entirety of the climax of Metal Gear 2, there was not a single I am your father moment like MGS is acting like there was. Which relates to what I was saying earlier about Snake and Liquid being his sons, which was completely made up for this game. Big Boss never really had a complicated backstory in the 8-bit games. While he had a motive in Metal Gear 2, in the first game he was mainly a villain for the sake of being a villain. However, when thinking about it, there is actually one way that this makes sense. Campbell said,
It happened in Zanzibar 6 years ago. Only Snake and I know the real truth of what happened there.
the choice words being real truth. So I've come up with a bit of a hypothesis, and I'm just going to make sure you know I don't think that they thought of this, but I'm just saying this is my personal headcanon. Also, I'm probably about to use terms we haven't gotten to in the series yet, but bear with me. In the 1970s, Big Boss was turned into a bit of an icon thanks to the fabricated truths of the events of Operation Snake Eater and the San Geronimo incident. And so, Big Boss left the group he was in with his allies known as the Patriots. Point is, that if said organization does that sort of thing, and they're obviously still around well past the 1970s as Sons of Liberty and Guns of the Patriots have told us, then who's to say the events of Metal Gear 2 was not a fabricated story about the Zanzibar incident? And that's why Big Boss didn't say anything about him and Snake being father and son, since later in this game it's established that Snake and Liquid were a secret kept from the rest of the world.
You two are an embarrassment from the 1970s. Our country's dirty little secret.
And that could also explain why Big Boss was completely incinerated in Metal Gear 2 but somehow has remains in MGS1 to give away to the Rogue Foxhound group. Like I said earlier, I don't even remotely think that's what they meant by any of this, but that's just, again, my personal headcanon, since that would be the only way to explain away the inconsistency. Although given the fact that Metal Gear 1 and 2 were both given English translations for Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, I don't know why they didn't take that opportunity to add that crucial detail into the second game. Not like there was any voice acting to add in, just lines of text, and while I'm no programmer, I'm assuming that adding those one or two sentences wouldn't be that difficult. So anyway, with that said, let us move on. Thanks to help from Otacon and a really stupid guard, Snake busts out of the cell and makes his way to the tower where he faces off against Liquid, who's piloting a High-ND. Afterwards, one of the most memorable moments in the game ensues where Otacon asks Snake an important question.
Do you think love can bloom, even on a battlefield?
Yeah, I do. I think at any time, any place, people can fall in love with each other.
I don't really have much to say on this, other than it's a really solid moment where these two completely different people can connect on an emotional level, thus setting up for the later games. Another one of the game's better moments comes to the forefront as Snake must then have a final sniper duel with Sniper Wolf, but before she dies, like the other bosses, she gives a monologue about her life before this point. And we see that Snake begins to see past his personal grudge against her for capturing Meryl, and respects her much more. I also really enjoy the scene afterwards where Snake and Otacon realize that time's almost up as the situation becomes even more serious than it already was before, setting up for an intense climax.
I'm going to the underground base. We're out of time.
I know.
You'll have to protect yourself now. Don't trust anyone.
Yeah.
If I can't stop Metal Gear, this whole place will probably be bombed to hell.
Yeah.
We might not meet again.
Which leads us into the ending, where Snake defeats Vulcan Raven, to which he gives Snake a lecture about his never-ending path of destruction. And I really like this scene.
The path you walk on has no end. No matter how far you go, or how many corpses you crawl over, the killing will never end. It's a future without hope.
Having the insight of Metal Gear Solid 2 and especially Metal Gear Solid 4, it's just sad since Snake's character really never does stop this life until the very bitter end. Before kicking the bucket though, Raven reveals that the DARPA chief was not the one who died in the cell at the beginning, but was instead Decoy Octopus, who was disguised as the DARPA chief to get info from Snake, since Ocelot accidentally killed the DARPA chief during the interrogation. Anyway, Snake gets more codec calls from Master Miller, who's questioning Naomi's motives, since earlier Naomi had said some things about her grandfather, but Miller questioned that since her historical facts were wrong, in addition to Naomi already saying she didn't know her own family. I love these calls, since Snake is having just as much of a hard time believing it as I was in the first playthrough, since in the previous games, yes, Big Boss betrayed you in Outer Heaven, and Madnar betrayed you in Zanzibar, but over here the radio cast is just so likable that it's hard to see coming. But alas, it's true. Naomi lied about her background and injected Snake with a shot before the mission started, which contained the Foxdie virus, which targets certain victims and simulates a heart attack, hence why Decoy Octopus and Baker died. The reveal that Campbell and Naomi were lying to you was set up fairly early on. However, the fact that Campbell, Snake's main ally during the Zanzibar incident, knew that Snake was essentially put on this mission to accidentally use Foxdie to kill the members of Foxhound so the government wouldn't have to pay them money or give them Big Boss really adds to the atmosphere, since at this point, who can you trust? Everyone pretty much has set you up from the very moment you swam into Shadow Moses, thus creating an incredibly lonely atmosphere, since Otacon is pretty much the only one on your side at this point. Of course, Mei Ling and Nastasha are there, but you're never going to talk to them anyway, or at least I never did. Naomi manages to get in contact with Snake to confess all her lies, and then says that her brother was Gray Fox, who found her as a child and raised her, and that's when she met Big Boss and was taken to America. But then the two of them went to Zanzibar, and that's when Snake killed the both of them. So Naomi vowed revenge and now programmed Foxdie to kill Snake as well. But unfortunately now regrets it after getting to know Snake. She also lets him know that she wasn't the one who planned to use Foxdie on him, but she's caught and captured before she can say who did. This is another sad moment since now Snake's days are irreversibly numbered, all because of petty revenge. So anyway, Snake must use the temperature changing card key to deactivate Rex, but it turns out that the key was actually what activated Rex. It's then that Master Miller reveals that he wasn't Miller at all, but instead...
Me, dear brother. Liquid, how the...
Liquid Snake. And while I know it sounds stupid for Liquid to put his hair up and put sunglasses on and fool everybody, however the way they handled it makes a ton of sense. As Matthew Matosis once said, games back then had used the same actors for different characters before. Like look at Mega Man 8 and Mega Man X4. They used the same cast to play different people, so it could be easily written off given just how differently the lines are delivered. Miller has a very laid-back performance with a caring attitude.
Snake, you can have regrets if you want to. It's only natural. But you can't keep attacking yourself for things that happened in the past.
And Liquid, on the other hand, is incredibly over the top since he frequently laughs, screams, "What's wrong, Snake?" whines,
You stole everything from me.
and just loves every second of it. It also can't be a coincidence that Liquid disguised as Miller was the one to blow Naomi's cover, since that gets all Snake's and the player's attention on Naomi, not arousing any suspicion on himself. Although one problem here is that it is established that Liquid has set up Snake from the whole time to activate Rex.
Huh? You didn't think you made it this far by yourself, did you?
In a non-interactive medium, this is fine, but in a video game it doesn't make sense, since if you were meant to activate Rex the whole time, there's just one problem with this storytelling trope. If you don't get it, my point is, how can you get a game over if you were literally meant to activate Rex the whole time? Liquid and Snake share a back and forth where Liquid reveals that genetically he is the inferior son of Big Boss, since they are not average sons, but clones of Big Boss. And Liquid resents Snake for being the superior clone on the genetic level, and for being the one who killed Big Boss, thus stealing his chance for revenge. That ends with Liquid piloting Rex to kill Snake, but that's when Gray Fox jumps in to save the day and destroys a part of Rex. Fox tells Snake that he was the one who killed Naomi's parents and that was why he had taken her in, and requests Snake to tell her that as he sacrifices himself to help Snake defeat Liquid. To which Snake defeats Metal Gear, but Liquid is still alive. Following that, the two have one last hand-to-hand before the end. Although before that, Liquid gives like an 11-minute rant about how Snake is the dominant brother and a bunch of other exposition about the Gulf War and the Human Genome Project, and it's pretty boring, since for the most part it's just a bunch of repetitive information. Like, how many times can you say in one scene that Snake is the dominant one and Liquid is mad about that? Like, we get it already. A problem that only proceeds to get worse as the series goes along. However, a very interesting part is when Liquid discusses how he and Snake are truly one and the same.
So why are you here then? Why do you continue to follow your orders while your superiors betray you? Why did you come here? Well, I'll tell you then. You enjoy all the killing. That's why.
What?
Are you denying it? Haven't you already killed most of my comrades?
That was...
In this game, nothing tells you not to kill, and so you'll probably kill everything in sight in Metal Gear 1 and 2, as well as this game, since once you get the SOCOM suppressor, combat is just less of a hassle when killing everyone, since using stun grenades for the whole game is definitely less than ideal. So yes, the player killed because it was easier, so Liquid really isn't wrong. And of course, you have to kill the bosses, so there's no way for Liquid to actually be wrong in this case. Thus meaning on repeat playthroughs you feel bad for doing it, since at the end of every game in the series you're given a rank based on how many times you died, how fast you beat the game, and how many people you killed, also how many rations you used, and so killing less people means you did a good job. The pressure is put on you even further in later games, and the remake where you have the sleep darts, giving you no excuse to kill people because you have a non-lethal weapon to use. Anyway, depending on your performance in the torture scene, Meryl will either be alive and escape with Snake, or she'll be dead and Otacon and Snake have to escape. The second of which being my preference, since in Metal Gear Solid 2, Otacon and Snake are working together with Meryl nowhere in sight. In addition to that, Snake is seen using the stealth camouflage, which was given to him by Otacon in the bad ending of this game. I also never really cared for the romance of Snake and Meryl, so I just forget about her. Also, everything gets cleared up with Campbell, so it's good that him and Snake are on good terms, as well as Snake and Naomi, since Snake shows that he's gained a lot of humanity since he spares Naomi the pain of having to hear that Gray Fox killed her parents.
He told me to tell you to forget about him, and to go on with your own life. He also said he'll always love you. Naomi, your brother just saved you, me, and the whole world.
But every time I looked at her, I saw her parents' eyes staring back at me. Tell her for me. Tell her that I was the one who did it.
So from there, Liquid dies from Fox Die, which confirms that Snake will die from it one day too. Although I'm seriously going to question this for a sec. Liquid did not die from the High-N-D explosion. He didn't die from being blown up inside Rex. He didn't die from falling off of Rex when he said that Snake would.
If you cross this line, you fall. At this height, it will kill even you.
He survived being shot in the face several times and being in a car crash, but Fox Die kills this guy? Liquid was never implied to be anything more than a normal person like Snake, unlike freaks like Vamp or Psycho Mantis who are obviously supernatural. So this is kinda stupid. But anyway, Snake and Meryl / Otacon ride off into the sunset, ending Metal Gear Solid. After the credits, we get a scene where Ocelot's talking to the President of the United States, and this scene has like 4 revelations in it. 1. Ocelot was never working for Foxhound, but was instead working as a spy for the President of the United States, which explains why Ocelot doesn't really get along with the other members or really do anything, since he's not one of them. 2. Ocelot intentionally killed the DARPA chief since he had found out his identity earlier. 3. That Solid Snake is really the inferior clone of Big Boss and Liquid was the dominant one. Genes are a major theme of Metal Gear Solid, and it's a really good reveal that Liquid was the dominant one since he believed in genetic destiny. And so with him really being the dominant clone, it says something that the recessive clone of Big Boss is the one to defeat him and end his revolution, contradicting his notion of genetic destiny. Although it really does just mean that all the time Liquid spent ranting about it was all time down the drain, unfortunately. I thought the idea that Liquid being the recessive clone made sense in a genetic way since Eva from Metal Gear Solid 3 is the mother of both Solid Snake and Liquid Snake. So if he is the recessive clone of Big Boss, it wouldn't make sense for him to have some of her traits as opposed to Solid Snake who looks exactly like Big Boss or Naked Snake in his days during Operation Snake Eater. And 4, the President of the US is secretly the 3rd clone of Big Boss, the perfect clone after the imperfect Solid and Liquid. He is Solidus Snake. More on that in Sons of Liberty. So that's the story of Metal Gear Solid, and obviously I don't need to say much more on that. It's great. Outside of the retcons and Liquid turning into Superman at the end, the story holds up really well and is a really engaging mystery with likable characters, despicable villains, and a strong anti-nuclear weapons message, and a ton of depth to back it all up. So many things had to be left out of the summary since this game has like a 1,000 page script. most of which being optional codec dialogue that most players will probably never see in their lives unless you stop every 2 seconds and call everyone your contacts. The voice acting is also incredibly well done. In an era of awful acting, it's refreshing to see such good performances. Since I'm gonna say, I think the whole game would be ruined if the acting was bad, given how the game's success is practically riding on the quality of the acting and script. Standouts being Cam Clark as Liquid, Patrick Zimmerman as Ocelot, Christopher Randolph as Otacon, and most notably David Hayter as Solid Snake. He adds a ton of depth to the performance, since with this voice you can really buy the fatigued soldier persona that Snake has. This is also before the Snake voice became more played up and over the top in the 6th gen games, so here it's much more grounded. During the synopsis, I didn't talk much about the remakes, and story-wise both are exactly the same. However, the original has some incredibly poor audio quality since they recorded the lines in a house without soundproof walls.
Stay alert. He'll be through here. I know it. I'm going to swat down a couple of bothersome flies. Stay alert. He'll be through here. I know it. I'm going to swat down a couple of bothersome flies.
It wasn't noticeable on the PS1 hardware, but if it was to be on the GameCube, then you'd hear all the trucks and such going by, which would be bad. So they got almost the entire cast back to redo the entire thing for the remake. The only character that isn't the same, to my knowledge, is Gray Fox, and while I like his original voice, the voice in the remake just fits the look of the character in Metal Gear 2 way more.
Snake, we're not tools of the government or anyone else.
Snake, we're not tools of the government or anyone else.
Other than that, everyone's the same, but difference being how Naomi and Mei Ling no longer have their accents. But I'm personally fine with this, since Metal Gear Solid 4 didn't have the accents either, so it's just more consistent this way. Some lines are just said differently, which is a change I'm indifferent on. It's a pick your preference kind of deal.
Now I'll finish the work that Father began. I will surpass him. I will destroy him.
You're just like Naomi.
Well, I'm not like you. Now I'll finish the work that Father began. I will surpass him. I will destroy him.
You're just like Naomi.
Well, I'm not like you.
However, my only issue is that some characters just sound really bored. In particular, Colonel Campbell. To me, he sounds more like the AI Colonel from Metal Gear Solid 2 more than the real deal Campbell. It's not a deal breaker, it just distracts the hell out of me considering how I'm so used to the original at this point. Otherwise, the other characters like Snake and Ocelot sound more in line with their appearances in later games. However, the weirdest thing is how the script has received minor edits that ultimately don't detract from or enhance the experience, so I don't know why they bothered, but I have a few examples.
I quit being a drill instructor, so I moved out here for some peace and quiet.
I quit being a boot camp instructor, so I moved out here for some peace and quiet.
And you were able to kill him, knowing that?
Yep,
How?
wanted it.
And you were able to kill him, knowing that?
Yep,
How?
it's what we wanted. Me. And him.
Foolish man! He prayed for death, and it found him. Foolish man! When death is entreated, the battle is decided.
As if Metal Gear Solid fans weren't bothered enough by the new dialogue, the real elephant in the room with the Twin Snakes has got to be the new cutscenes. Hideo Kojima wanted to give the Twin Snakes a different feeling to it than the original, so the cutscenes were given extremely over-the-top action to support them. In moderation, in my opinion. Scenes that already had action to begin with got the new cuts, such as when the Cyborg Ninja first appears. I honestly don't have much to object to here on paper, however what kind of ruins them is the amount of slow motion. In my opinion, if done right, this can be extremely cool, however, in general, I prefer action scenes to be more kinetic, which makes it more exciting. Sometimes the Twin Snakes has that, but other times not. Most ridiculous ones being how when Rex first appears, Snake tries to attack it directly, don't know what he thought he was going to do there. Second being when Liquid fires a missile from behind, Snake jumps off of it to land on an extra hit. That one I've got to admit is really stupid. But other than that, I don't see where fans take such offense to this. While the shots look really cheesy sometimes, Twin Snakes isn't meant to replace the original. Never has been meant for that, just an alternate telling of the story you're all familiar with. Given how the game started out as Miyamoto and Kojima agreeing that a Metal Gear game should be on the GameCube, but Kojima didn't want fans who bought a PS2 for Metal Gear Solid 2 and any upcoming sequels to have to jump ship, I think a retelling of the original was the best of both worlds. But at the end of the day, at least it wasn't Metal Gear on NES, right? In all seriousness though, some of the cutscenes are just ridiculous, like this elevator ambush. Or the only one I personally define to be really that bad is when Otacon trips during Sniper Wolf's death. That was stupid. Way to take the audience out of a serious scene, guys. But other than that, the new scenes are well choreographed with great motion capture work and animation. Although there's an obscene amount of motion blur. And as someone proficient in video editing, it drives me crazy to be able to see motion blur on my TV as I'm watching these action scenes. So all in all, I prefer the cutscenes from the original, but I don't see the game-ruining problem with the Twin Snakes telling of the story. Later in the video, this will be reiterated, but I don't see how in Metal Gear Solid 4, it's epic when Solid Snake and Liquid Ocelot are battling on top of Outer Haven, but when Solid Snake and Liquid Snake are doing the same thing here, it's wrong. The presentation for the original is fantastic. Shadow Moses Islands feels lived in with dark, murky environments that are dripping with atmosphere. I'm not usually one who has much to say on these matters, so I guess the footage can just speak for itself in that regard. What complements the atmosphere would most definitely be the soundtrack, with tracks perfectly accompanying the stealth gameplay, to the great boss music capturing the intensity of the fight. To the memorable Enclosure theme which plays during the game's more tragic moments. All of which coming to a close with the phenomenal credits theme, The Best Is Yet to Come, which is the perfect song to end such a huge game. On the Twin Snakes side of things, the soundtrack is one of the weaker aspects of the game. It's fine on its own merits, but it's nothing compared to the original or the sequels, since it's missing some of the classic themes from the original. To give credit where credit's due, I think the remake has the superior rendition of the Metal Gear theme, as well as a great variation of the Psycho Mantis theme. Other than a few others, the Twin Snakes soundtrack really falls flat and is hardly something you'd ever listen to after the credits have stopped rolling, but I'll show you some of my other favorites. With the graphics obviously taking a page out of the Sons of Liberty book, the game has a much different feel than the original. It worked for the big shell to look all shiny and new since that's what they were going for in the story. However, with Twin Snakes it kind of kills the atmosphere that the original had, since this new look goes directly against what Shadow Moses was in the original game. But in terms of character models, animation, and detail, there's obviously no contest as which is superior. Well, except for Otacon's face, because what the hell happened there? However, on the whole, the feel of Twin Snakes' environment is what's out of place. With all that said and done, let us get into the real meat and potatoes of the video game, the gameplay. Well, where do I begin? Metal Gear Solid is an incredibly faithful transition to 3D, since it didn't reinvent the wheel whatsoever. The gameplay you remember from the 2D games is all here and accounted for. In addition to all of Snake's new moves from the last game, new moves such as crawling along the ground, which can be used to collect mines, and crouching, which you can also use to get up close to a wall and slowly walk alongside it. You control Snake with the D-pad by default, but Metal Gear Solid supports full analog control, which is my preferred pick since it's a bit more comfortable for me. Snake also has evolved his punch to a 2-punch kick combo, which is effective in combat with guards, but bosses being another story. Other than that, legitimately, the core mechanics don't really need much more commenting on, since that's really all there is to it in this game when it comes to controlling Snake. Just a single paragraph. So with that said, let's dive into items. When it comes to weapons, Snake can pick up quite a bit. Although I'm definitely going to compliment the fact that there's only one weapon per every type of weapon, like there's only one assault rifle, one pistol, one sniper rifle, etc. This means that while there is a variety in how you approach situations, there aren't so many options as to get a bit redundant since you have like 30 types of assault rifles or something. Snake can finally once again run and shoot at the same time like in Metal Gear 1, but you'd have to know the trick to do that, by holding down a few buttons at once. I still don't get why this is never told to the player, or why you need a strategy in the first place, but it is better than the last game where you had to stand perfectly still and fire your guns. At the very beginning you're granted with a Soliton radar, and what that does is display everything in the surrounding area you can't see with your eyes, since despite the game being in 3D we still have a fixed camera angle on our hands. While added to the convenience of Metal Gear 2, on the whole, both of the previous games you really didn't need a radar since all the information was displayed on screen, like enemy locations, hiding spots, and cameras. Here you need that radar since the more zoomed in camera angle will lead you into things you couldn't see coming. Thankfully, the game also has a first-person view so you can see the surrounding area in more detail. So basically, since the radar gets jammed when you're caught, this means stealth is of the utmost importance. Guards' intelligence has evolved yet again. Since we're now in 3D, guards can spot you from further distances than the other games. So be careful, because the Metal Gear 1 days are definitely over. In the Twin Snakes, the gameplay is largely lifted from Metal Gear Solid 2, so full details to come in the next review. But Snake now has a fancy new combat animation, which is incredibly smooth and satisfying and works well in any situation. Also, Snake can hop over rails, which again, adds to the convenience of the game. And guards can spot you from even further distances, so be careful. But one major improvement in Twin Snakes will be how you can aim your weapons in first person, which you could not do in the original. Yeah, I said it was an improvement since it balances out the guards very well, since the original game used an auto-aim system where you had to potentially shoot into the air and pray to land a hit. In the original, this wasn't a deal breaker since the game was reasonably well designed around this, but I'll take the better control and aiming in this case. With the new aiming comes Snake's ability to hold up guards at gunpoint, which is by far one of the most satisfying abilities in Metal Gear history.
Freeze.
I can never get tired of using it. People might complain that the dog tags you get for it are useless, unlike Metal Gear Solid 2, but personally, I've never bothered collecting dog tags once in my life. I never cared about that, to be honest. I just enjoyed holding guards up. It's still a legitimate criticism that they don't do anything, but it's not a deal breaker whatsoever. The level design is also entirely lifted from the original, which works against this game since certain sections are made too easy with the new aiming. However, if this ruins the game, you could always just not use it. Personally though, I don't really mind being able to shoot out cameras with guns since it saves me the trouble of waiting for the chaff grenades to blow up. Since either way, the camera's out of commission, so what difference does it make? I think the Twin Snakes in general just have more variety in the amount of ways you can deal with situations, like the tank boss for example. In the original you had to toss a grenade into it twice and it was done. Here you can blow out the tires with mines, shoot the gunner with first person aiming, or use the good old grenade strategy. Your choice. And that's what I like in a game. Options. That's been a major theme of my Mega Man X reviews after all. In terms of items, the usual rations and cardboard boxes are back, and rations now only have one flavor again, and they just heal you, which is fine by me since the extra variety in Metal Gear 2 was a bit unnecessary. The cardboard box is expanded upon more though. There are several types of boxes in the game, and these have different labels so you can only use them in the corresponding areas or else guards aren't buying it. That, and you have to be tactical about your box placement since if you do it in the middle of a room you're just going to get caught. So I like this change since it makes the cardboard box concept make a ton more sense than it used to. However, as usual, we must discuss the card keys. In Metal Gear Solid, they finally wised up and realized that a level 5 card should just open all doors labeled 1 through 5. Thank you! However, it can be really annoying to have to keep equipping cards just to open one door. The process has been streamlined, yes, but it's still more annoying than it needs to be. The Twin Snakes, again, just does it the MGS2 way where doors just open automatically if you have that card. I mean really, the card key system is only there just so you can't go places the story doesn't want you to, so why not just open the doors automatically at that point? I don't know, but I'm glad MGS2 and the Twin Snakes realized that. I'm also happy to report that MGS1 does not have some of the most annoying elements from Metal Gear 2, like the stupid Green Beret section or the swamp area, since those two in particular were enough to make you want to put the game down. What is similar to Metal Gear 2 though is a wide assortment of things, like a mysterious man from the shadows who calls to give Snake advice, and this turns out to be Gray Fox both times. Snake is chased up a million flights of stairs, which drags out in Metal Gear 2 because of how easy it is, and drags out Metal Gear Solid because of how atrocious the auto-aim is, and is again really easy in Twin Snakes. Snake is ambushed inside of an elevator by 4 guards, and this actually happens twice in Metal Gear Solid 1. A cyborg ninja appears from both, who was a dead character from the previous game, putting Snake's actions into a different light, and a high and D is battled in all the games so far. A shape memory alloy plot device that forces you to run back and forth, etc. This must have been done since the developers probably thought that American gamers were never going to play Metal Gear 2 and decided to reuse a lot of ideas from it and retcon the story. Unfortunately though, backtracking has not been fixed from the other games. I will say it's been improved from the last game, since at the very least there is nothing as bullshit as the Card 8 and Card 9 fiasco for Metal Gear 2. But when Snake and Meryl must separate so Snake can get a sniper rifle, that was just done so there would be a reason for Meryl to get kidnapped. But in that case, did we really have to go all the way back to the armory? It's such an unnecessarily long distance just for story reasons. In the remake, the sniper rifle can be found here as well. However, if you want, you can travel a much smaller distance just to get a non-lethal sniper rifle to use against Sniper Wolf, which does work, I might add. On the topic of that, can I mention how horrible the sniper controls are in the original? Since you can only shoot from the ground, and you turn so slowly, so it's just so awkward to use. In the remake, we now have proper controls, like zooming in and out for more accuracy, bringing the sniper controls to an A+. In both games, your hands will constantly shake, so to slow them down, you must use diazepam, which is all fine and good for the first encounter, but in the second, the game forgot to give you more, so oops, a minor issue remedied in the remake. Anyway, the other major moment of backtracking comes when Snake needs to use the PAL key to accidentally activate Rex. First, you must go down these excruciatingly slow ladders to get the thing, then back up to put the room temperature version in, then back to the ice room to go back, and it's just so stupid. You have to travel up these ladders like 7 times. It is unbelievably monotonous. The only reason they did it was to have a way to space out these last few major codec calls before Rex is active. But in that case, couldn't there be a way to make it more convenient, like a certain remake? Where you only have to travel upstairs and not ladders? Where you can change the temperature of the key in the same room? Seriously, this shit is so annoying. I never look forward to all this back and forth. By the way guys, I really don't want it to seem like I'm shitting on the original. I love the game, I really do, but I can just not deny the fact that I feel like Twin Snakes is just the more convenient game to go back to. Since that leads me to another thing I don't like about the original, and that would be the difficulty balancing. At the beginning, Snake's health bar is small, just like in Metal Gear 1 and 2. However, the game is not designed around this at all. This has been said before, but compare this to Zelda, where at the beginning you have way less health and weapons than you do at the end, but there the difficulty is scaled back to be easier than the later challenges. This is just game design 101, people. I can't think of a reason why this would be hard to grasp. However, Metal Gear Solid is the same difficulty at the beginning that it is at the end, which makes the late game really, really easy, but the early game really, really annoying. Remember back in my review of the first Metal Gear game where I said I tried this game and did not like it? Only then giving another chance around this time last year. You do? Good. This was the reason why. I just kept dying over and over and over again because the game wasn't sufficiently designed around the limited health bar. That, and the game throws obstacles your way that are never used again. Like how in the very first few minutes you have to deal with water puddles that make noise and leave footsteps, or snow that you can be traced by, or searchlights, and we haven't even found the DARPA chief yet. And like I said, these obstacles never come back, so what the fuck? You might say Twin Snakes' updates make it too easy, but 1, play the game on hard mode. I got my ass kicked because it requires a higher level of stealth mastery. And 2, the original's design was extremely flawed as is, so again, Twin Snakes handled it better in my opinion. Still lazy how the game never uses searchlights or puddles again, but what can you do? Another general nitpick would be this part here. Snake must maneuver past gun cameras, and if you're out of chaff grenades and don't have enough rations to get by, then oops. And if this is where your save point was, then I guess that's it, the game's over. The remake again gives you options as to how to progress through these areas. Again, more convenient to play. So anyway, I couldn't think of a better place to mention this, so let's do it now. The torture scene is probably one of the most memorable moments in the game, since Ocelot has Snake on the electric table, and you either then give up, resulting in the bad ending where Meryl dies, and the game really makes you feel bad for doing it by the way, or you resist the torture by mashing the ever-living daylights out of the button, which effectively creates a bond between you and Snake, since while he's surviving the torture, you're being tortured at the same time by having to hit the button so many times. Otherwise, if you die, then it's game over. A legit game over since Snake dies and you have to go back to the title screen and have to reload your save file, which is probably why if you haven't saved at all or barely saved, you get an uncharacteristic call from Mei Ling asking you to save your game. Surviving the torture means you get the good ending, and doing so grants Snake infinite ammo on New Game Plus, and then the bad ending grants you the stealth camouflage, which can be used to be invisible to all guards, which is extremely satisfying since you can literally not try for almost the entire game. The only thing the stealth camouflage does not work on are the bosses, and speaking of which, the boss fights? They're pretty bad. These are some of the most memorable villains in gaming history, and yet the bosses are not fun to fight. Ocelot just involves you running around the room hoping to get a shot in, which is the exact opposite of fun design. And in the remake, you can just stand still and headshot him until he's down. The M1 tank has attacks that are hard to foresee and a pattern that is hard to maneuver around. And the cyborg ninja kills you in like 2 hits, making the whole thing unbelievably tedious. In the remake, it's also tedious since you're doing the same damn thing since you press the B button over and over and over and over and over again. Psycho Mantis, yeah, I get it, he reads the memory card, and that's all great. Especially in the remake where he lists all the Nintendo games you've played, but as a boss, he just sucks, since you have to blindly aim at the air hoping to land a shot and probably die in the process. That, and how in the world are you supposed to figure out that you can change controller ports and win? There's nothing in the game that tells you that other than Campbell calling you telling you to do that. Why not have Mantis say something clever like, I can read your every move, player 1, inspiring you to change slots? That would have been a good boss fight, but no, he's just really undercooked and extremely overrated. In the original, Wolf is bad because of the previously established sniper control issues, and Vulcan Raven is probably the best one in the game since you actually have to hide out and lure him into traps, thus putting your huge toolbox and all the stealth techniques you've learned to use, except when this happens. Or when you play the remake. The boss against the Hind is fairly safe, albeit drawn out, but in the end, the bosses with Rex and Liquid are also pretty good and are very climactic. But on the whole, Metal Gear Solid has just some really lame bosses. Some are better in the remake, some are worse, so overall just not very good fights to complement the great cast of villains, since at the very least, the villains in the last 2 games sucked as characters as much as they did bosses. With all that said and done, that pretty much covers the original and the Twin Snakes. So before we close today, let's discuss the aftermath of the game. Metal Gear Solid was the first in the series to have a major re-release, that being Metal Gear Solid Integral in Japan with bonus VR missions, since the original had those for tutorial purposes but nothing more. Integral also added the first-person view since apparently the Japanese version of Metal Gear Solid didn't have that. So if you want to play Integral, I hear that the PC version is the same thing, however personally I don't own that and don't really feel a strong need to do so since I've got the perfectly functional PlayStation version as well as Twin Snakes. That and the PC version is pretty expensive from what I hear, so if you really want it, go ahead, but I'd personally recommend picking up MGS on PSN since it's only $10. If you want a real steal though, you can pick up the MGS Legacy Collection, which contains the MSX titles, Metal Gear Solid, VR Missions, Sons of Liberty, Snake Eater, Peace Walker, and Guns of the Patriots. Speaking of that, the Legacy Collection is the only reason I own Metal Gear Solid VR Missions, which was an American gamer's first chance to experience the new VR missions from Integral. This review is actually the first time I'm ever touching the game in almost 2 years, since personally, I never found a reason to try it. But here we go! Right off the bat, I must compliment the cool remixes of the tracks from the MSX games. Other than that though, this game bores me to tears. There are 300 missions to play here, and I hear that some of them are cool and unique, but the rest are all tutorial level crap that can be done within a few seconds, and it is so boring. Like, people had to pay money for this? Shooting targets? Sneaking past guards? Personally, I'd feel ripped off. And apparently Gray Fox is also playable, and he's on the title screen and front cover, however, you can play as him for 3 missions. Out of 300. Moving on. One more thing before we close today. In 2006, the story of Metal Gear Solid was released as a digital comic, with redone acting yet again, which unlike the Twin Snakes, I actually do think the acting here really isn't that good. And I really don't see the point. The comic was released on the PSP, a console I'm fairly certain you can play Metal Gear Solid on. It's also on the Legacy Collection as well as the digital comic for Sons of Liberty. But if you have the games, why watch a movie with half the runtime about the games? I just don't get it. If you want to watch them on YouTube, that's what I did. But the most memorable part of the whole thing being how there are more retconny antics in this.
East of your worries. Now that Metal Gear is destroyed, just what do you think the Patriots will do to cover up this debacle?
Patriots? Who?
Why is that funny?
Oh, never mind. Sometimes I forget just how far out of the loop you really are.
So in the end, I want to address something. I know I've been incredibly kind to the Twin Snakes throughout this video, and I feel like some might be prepared to call me nostalgia blind or whatever, so I figured I'd go on record to say that right now, as I've established, Metal Gear Solid 1 was my first Metal Gear game. When I first played Twin Snakes, I had already beaten Metal Gear Solid 1 through 4, and Ground Zeroes, as well as Metal Gear 1. So there's no nostalgia here since I played and beat both games last year in 2016. I grew up with the PS2 and the GBA, so there's no way my mind's playing tricks on me in regards to my take on the Twin Snakes' quality. If you hate the Twin Snakes, that's fine. I'm sure you have your reasons, but people go so far as to say that if you even liked anything about it, then you aren't a true fan. I'm a huge Metal Gear fan, so that's why I simply find this insulting. Instead of giving you all my issues with it, my friend Alec Alger, the SideQuest gamer, is far more experienced with describing the issues of this kind of thing, so I'll hand the mic over to him to explain all the reasons why this is just absurd.
You're not a true fan if you like Deus Ex Invisible War. You're not a true fan if you like Metroid Other M. And you're especially not a true fan if you even think about liking Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, the 6th generation remake to the utterly flawless perfection that is Metal Gear Solid. Hey, hello everyone, I am Alec Alger, the SideQuest gamer, and one of the things I've always been sick of hearing is the ultimate comment section cancerous no true Scotsman fallacy, that is the you're not a true fan point that they bring up. I find this mentality so elitist and pretentious because who is anyone else to decide that they themselves are in fact the true fan of this franchise, and that anyone else not aligned with their preferences is the false fan? For one, a fan is simply someone who enjoys something, like a book, TV show, movie, toy line, heck, any franchise or item in general. There's no rules to how you like it, so already this true fan mentality is the oxymoron of the century. Now, they could be a fan of something for how they deem it as well made from a critical standpoint, or support it regardless of their own quality standards just because it is that brand, kind of like how some Xbox One aficionados, and a few vocal ones more specifically, will tell you it's better than PC gaming, even to the point where they'll debate the specs are better than a maxed out PC, which is a rather short debate, but forget about that. You can be a fan in the positive, more critical light, or be like the one who will defend your brand like it's a member of your family, or heck, somewhere in the middle. Both sides like their particular brand or product, that's what they all have in common. And a game like Metal Gear Solid is one of those examples of how fans really love it to the point where anything that's different might not be agreeable with them. Metal Gear Solid had a suspenseful atmosphere keeping the player in a constantly vulnerable position on a daring stealth rescue mission in sub-zero conditions, accompanied by a pretty well-written story. Well, minus the Metal Gear 2 retcon because Big Boss never said he was Solid Snake's father in that game. Don't know why they did that, but whatever. Metal Gear Solid is still mostly a well-written story. But when a remake for the GameCube came out, it was well received by critics, but some of the fans of the original would just not have it. They claimed the limitations of the overhead combat in the original worked for it, and how first-person aiming in the remake utterly ruined some of the boss battles. How the cutscenes are way too, how do I put it, Matrixy, and therefore horrible recreations of the original scenes. I mean, I personally agree with this, but Metal Gear Solid 2, and especially the fan-favorite Metal Gear Solid 3, had instances of these Matrix-type cutscenes, so why is it wrong in Twin Snakes but perfectly fine in those other games? Now, I don't mind fans not liking Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, but I hate it when the vocal minority type on their Cheeto-stained keyboards about how I'm apparently not a true fan of Metal Gear Solid if I even like a supposedly dumbed-down MGS1 experience in Twin Snakes. To those, I say to go fuck an electronic pencil sharpener. Twin Snakes, in my point of view, as a standalone product, is a well-made game, and there are mechanical improvements like the no backtracking temperature keycards near the end of the game, the first-person aiming and improved AI, and the voice actors actually sound better, given it's on more powerful hardware, but they sound better regardless. Do I like the original Metal Gear Solid more? Yes, I do think it's better with a suspenseful atmosphere and cutscenes that were more grounded in reality, well, debatably, and am willing to deal with a more limited but still solid gameplay in exchange for the better experience, but I still really like Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, and if I had to make a top 10 best GameCube games, it wouldn't be on the top 10, but at least in my honorable mentions. There's a lot of good GameCube games, so that in itself is an honor. So really, I'm a true fan because I like Metal Gear Solid. No one else gets to decide what I should like, because the fact that I like it at all is perfectly harmless. I'm not going to force you to like something you genuinely don't like, because I'm not an elitist snob. Because preferences are subjective by nature. How can I like something the right or wrong way when there is no objective way to prefer something that is scientifically constructed and not sociologically? Am I not a true fan of chocolate for preferring milk chocolate over dark chocolate? Absolutely not. I'm just a guy who likes one thing over another. Simple as that. Please, hate Twin Snakes for all it's worth if you genuinely dislike it that much. I don't mind that. But if you belittle me over liking a piece of entertaining data that you don't like, then you're spiritually weak and in desperate need of professional help. And no, I don't mean this as a cheap anecdotal conclusion. If you are that protective of a piece of data that can't love back despite you giving it more love than you would your own mother, then yes, I think you really should consult a psychiatrist. And yes, I mean psychiatrist and not a psychologist, because this mental illness may require a medical prescription of antidepressants after they find out what went wrong in your childhood. I'm done with this toxic true fan mentality, and it should be dealt with zero tolerance. Thank you all so much for watching, and remember to stay awesome.
So at the end of the day, I said this earlier, but I want to reiterate it. Metal Gear Solid is a fantastic game, and I've been particularly harsh on it in this review since the original game is not perfect, never really has been. The bosses are lame, the aiming is flawed, and the backtracking is annoying. However, Metal Gear Solid does not crash and burn from these issues. The game successfully revitalized the Metal Gear series and put it on the path to make it one of the most beloved franchises in gaming history with its good gameplay, great writing, that was nothing like what most players were used to in that era, and being a leading innovator on how to tell stories in video games with fantastic acting and dialogue. Overall being a fantastic jump from 2D to 3D since so many other franchises had a difficult time with this. So to think the dormant Metal Gear franchise could pull out such a success is a testament to the game's quality. It's a timeless classic that will continue to be that for many years to come. However, again, the game's not perfect, and I genuinely believe that the Twin Snakes is a really strong game in its own right and makes improvements on many of the original game's flaws. And while it is also flawed, I don't think it's one of the worst Metal Gear games ever. That's just crazy talk. However, I do think there is a perfect game in between these two. Take the soundtrack, atmosphere, and voice acting in the original with the Twin Snakes mechanics, and make it a bit more refined, then that would be an easy 10 out of 10 from me. As it stands, I really don't prefer one over the other. I love both. So, to avoid continuing to ramble, that covers my full thoughts on Metal Gear Solid. So like I said at the beginning, since I had to keep you all waiting for this, the next review will be Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. So with that said, I will see you all then.